Got a Hi8 Sony Handycam in for service. This one here has got a couple different problems with it that we're going to have to tear this one all the way down and do some investigating. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get this one to work. Let's check it out.
Hi guys, I got a Sony camcorder. This one's a Hi8 camera. This one is a CCD-TRV72 that came in for repair. And the complaint on this one is that it doesn't work. So let's just see what is not working on it. He's telling me that there's a problem with the controls. So, and the controls are not lighting up. Will it eject? Let's see if it will eject. So it will eject the tape, but none of the controls are lighting up, which indicates that there's probably a problem with the ribbon cable that goes down the back here that connects the control board with the main camera. That's where I'm thinking the problem is as we sit before I even get into it. So first things first, let's we'll take the power off the camera first. We're going to open this one up and take a look and see where the problem might be. It might be the cable severed, and if that's the case, that might not be good. It might have just come disconnected. That's what always the hope is. We start by removing the screws to hold on the side cover, and we'll remove the right side cover to start. So there's arrow marked screws that need to come out. These two and the side cover should release. And with that, we cue the heater. One hidden screw. Cassette compartment must be down to remove this last screw here. And then the camera will pop apart. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to disconnect these ribbon cables. These ones just unplug. That one does. There's a gate on this one that you have to lift up. And same with on this one, there's a little gate you have to lift. So that separates the camera there. Now I can lift out the power block here. It should lift out. I got all the screws out. This should just lift out like that and unplug. And here's the screw I was talking about. There's a screw down here that is marked with an arrow, and you have to remove that one. And then once you remove that screw, then the side cover will lift off, and there is a ribbon cable here that needs to be disconnected. And that's why they have that screw in there, so that you don't rip the thing apart and tear the ribbon cable. And we're going to remove the power block here because I want to get to the ribbon on the back side of this and check it out and see whether it's damaged. It might just be that it's not making a good connection, but I want to inspect it. So actually I think it plugs in up here, if I'm not mistaken. It loops down and then comes back up on this particular model. So we'll remove the screws that hold the power board in place. And actually this is the interface board. The power board is this one. And we'll undo these connectors carefully. Take off the tape here on the back so that I have a bit of slack. That way I can undo this connector. I can undo it right here on the back of the board. And undo this one here. This is the one that I I'm concerned that may be damaged, because this one loops down and then it comes back up on this cassette assembly. Quite often these chassis come loose, which this one is in the process of coming loose. The screws that hold the chassis onto the frame actually come loose. I'm going to remove the camera block next, because I want to remove the board and look at the board itself, look at the chassis. And should be maybe one more screw up the front here. Lift that off. Is there one more or not? Unplug the camera block. Capacitors generally were not an issue on these cameras by this state of the game. They had pretty much solved the leaky cap issue that the earlier sets had problems with. Take out this ribbon in the front here carefully and remove this other one. This one's a socketed type, so we have to release the catch to remove that. Now the camera block is removed. I want to next take out the bottom here. The reason I'm taking this all down is, one, to redo the connectors, to reseat them all. That's for one. Because these do have the connectors that need to be reseated. They do fail on these ones. Just removing them and replacing them is usually good enough to fix them. But I also want to remove the chassis on this unit, so I'm going to pull the circuit board out by taking out these 3 screws. I want to pull the chassis and look at the flex cable that goes to the top, and the only way to get to that is to remove the circuit board. So the 3 screws there, I think that's it. There's just 3, and oh, gotta take out the power supply board here too, and then the power supply will lift out. It'll unplug, and the screw over here. If this ribbon cable is damaged, then there's not a heck of a lot that I can do on this thing because the part's not available. But the only option then to operate a camera like this may be with using a remote control, which is possible. And any Sony VCR remote, if the camera's got remote control capability, which most of them did, any Sony VCR remote set to VTR2 will operate. So the old Betamax machines were VTR1. Some of them had a switch for VTR1 and VTR2. 8mm was VTR2, and the VHS machines were VTR3. But most of them had a switch. You could select 1, 2, or 3 on that single remote. Any universal remote, the Sony code for VCR is VTR3, and that will control, or sorry, VTR2. That will control camcorders. I've got another ribbon cable up front here I've got to disconnect. This one here, this is for the video output, and there should be another one going to this little board here. This little board can come out as well. This one is the steady shot sensors. These are the motion sensors, accelerometers, I guess they call them, used for the anti-shake compensation. So now the board drops out. As you can see, I can undo these last 2 connectors down here. Get the board out of the way. These screws quite often come loose. They are loose on this one. See how loose that screw is? And this one here is also, that one's not so bad. This one here is okay, but this screw here would come loose. We're going to remove the chassis because I want to look underneath here. This will get me down to where that connector is. Okay, so now I can inspect this ribbon connector that goes up to here. It's this one right here. And see if it's damaged. This folds back and forth as the unit raises and lowers, and quite often it breaks. Sometimes it's just right here at the end too, but if it's not broken here, it might be damaged up in the key switch part. Now this used to be available as a service part. You used to be able to contact Sony and buy this piece, and it just clips on. But I haven't seen the switches in, you know, a long time. But we used to change these out on a regular basis. Usually where they break is right down here at the point that they fold. If I want to open this up to look at it, I can do it with my power supply. I'll just set my power supply down to some low voltage, like maybe 3 volts. That should be plenty, and then we'll use that to drive the loading motor directly, and this will raise or lower the cassette compartment. That was the wrong way. How about this way? Okay, now we've got the cassette compartment raised. I should be able to take off this switch assembly to inspect it. It just unclips. Sort of. It clips on this way, so if we lift it up on this side, should be able to lift it right off. And close that basket down a bit. Switch comes off just like that. Usually where it breaks is right there, and oh, it's broken. You can see it. Take a close look. I don't know if I'm going to be able to repair this or not. It looks like it's severed right there. You see? If you look right there on the edge, it looks like it's severed right there. So sometimes we can get lucky and scratch off the insulation and repair it, but it looks like it's damaged right at that point. You see there? It looks like just a tiny little tear right there at the point where it's folded. And it's severing power right there. About the only chance we have of fixing this is to try and scrape some of the insulation off on either side, so that I can bridge a wire over 3 wires in this case to try to repair it. I'm going to carefully, using my scalpel and a big magnifying glass, try to take a little bit of the insulation off so that I can bare some copper, and hopefully I'm able to fix this up. I don't know whether I'm going to be successful on this or not, but we don't have a lot of other choice when it comes down to these cameras, and so this was quite a common failure. They failed like this, so let's just see whether I can scrape enough of the insulation away that I can make a bridge over top of it with some fine wire. So I've got some solder tinned on either side of where it's severed. I'm going to try and get some fine wires, and we're going to put the fine wires over top of here, and then I will try to encapsulate it with something like epoxy or something to keep the wires from shorting together. Maybe just put some glue over it to try to prevent it from failing, at least in the short term. And the guy that owns this camcorder, you know, I'll advise him that he's probably watching the video anyway. This viewer, you know, get your tapes transferred, because we can get this thing going, but I can't guarantee any long-term lasting. You know, we'll beef it up with some adhesive, some epoxy or something to strengthen it up a bit. But again, once the cable's damaged like that, it's going to happen probably again, just because of the constant flexing. It was one of the stupid designs on this. I'm not a big fan of camcorders that used this design. To attempt this, you want to immobilize the part you're working on, I'm just using some packing tape to tape it down to the edge of the bench. That'll hold it flat so that I can work on it with these small wires which came from a section of VDS cable out of a television between the main board and the timing controller of an old LCD TV. They're very fine wires, and I was able to get the individual strands out of them. We're going to just put some strands on here if I can and solder them down. Part of the fun is picking up the damn wire. It's so fine. Barely pick this stuff up. I'm going to tin the wire first and try to tack it down.
I was working on this for a few hours to get this camera working, or get it to this point. I'm cutting a lot out because my head was in the shot when I was doing the micro soldering. Sorry about that, but I had to get in quite close to see what I was doing, and the camera was right over my head. So unfortunately you guys missed the micro soldering, but we got it.
Now if we inspect the wires that I've done. So I actually did more than I needed to, because if we look closely, you'll see that at this end, these two are actually connected together. Those two are both together. So these two are the same. They're bridged together. So there was really only 3. Right? These go to 2 separate places, obviously, on the switch. But at this end, they're bridged together. So even if they were shorted together, it wouldn't matter. So there's just basically the 3 of them that were severed. So let's start to put this thing back together and see whether it'll work. Gonna clip the top piece back in. These little hooks here, they clip into holes in the top of the chassis. Other problems that these ones have sometimes is this ribbon here gets severed, and where it gets severed is right where the latch latches in. We'll inspect this while I'm at it. Doesn't look like it's been damaged on this one, but one of the common problems on this is the B mechanism, is right down here. Is this one damaged or not? It's hard to tell. Let me see, get a close look at this. Let me give really good inspection, because this is another problem area on these units. If we look right down here where I've got the flashlight, see that little mark there? This one doesn't look like it's been cut. I'm just going to wipe that out and see if it's just dirt. It might just be dirt from the catch. Hopefully that's just dirt and it's not actually cutting into it. Okay, it looks like that was just some dirt. The bottom of this catch here, right down here, this bottom of this catch, on some of the machines that had a burr on it. And what would happen is, as this snapped into position, this catch right down here, that one there, the bottom of that catch, as it was latching, that rides down this groove here, and then it snaps over. This is what locks the mechanism in place. And the problem was, this bottom of this latch here had a burr on it, and that burr would actually slice through I'm not touching this, by the way, I'm just pointing it out with my scalpel, but it would actually cut through this ribbon. And when that happened, that would sever the signals coming off of the take-up spool. And then you'd push play or forward, and it would run for 2 or 3 seconds and then stop with an error code. And the only solution was to replace this entire slide assembly. And I've done a video on that. If you watch my Sony B mechanism chassis repair, chassis replace, it's a 3-part video. The first one was disassembling the unit, and I think getting the part from the donor, and getting the part from the donor, and the second one was replacing it, and the third one was doing the alignment. And that's where I took one of these mechanisms from a donor camera, and I took the chassis out of it and used that to repair my DCR TRV110. I think I have the chassis still here. I can maybe dig it out and show you guys at some time. But that's something to keep in mind on this particular chassis, is that can get severed. And if that's the case and it's shutting off because of that, again, you might get lucky being able to repair it, but don't hold your breath, and you'll never find a replacement. Okay, so let's throw this thing back together. Just put this in place, snap this in. Just line up the pins, and then it just slides back and drops into place, sort of like this. A little bit more work sometimes, but it snaps in place just like that. And I say this is where this is bent. So this is the problem with this, is because when it slides up and slides down, it tends to bend this cable. So I'm going to lower this mechanism down now, and then we'll start to reassemble the unit. Okay, mechanism's down now. You see this cable gets bent as it slides back and forth. It bends it. And that's the problem. It's not a good design, the way that they designed that with this switch. They all eventually break. And as I say, sometimes we get lucky, we can fix it and make it work. And it'll work for a period of time. But at some point, it's going to go bad again. There's just no real way to prevent that from happening. And the kicker to this is that even if you're lucky enough to find a donor camera that you could take one off of, how many times has it been opened? That's what it boils down to, is how many tapes have been installed and removed. And when someone's using a camera like this for archiving, there is a mode switch on this, but they don't give a lot of trouble. And they're hard to get at, to clean. As I say, they don't give us much issue though. those two back in, and the board can drop into place. Think of how much fun I'd be having if I hadn't got another one of these Sony screwdrivers from a viewer that sent it to me. Obviously somebody who had worked for Sony in the past, or worked at a Sony depot and had one. But I bought some small precision screwdrivers out of Japan, and they fit, but they're not as comfortable to use as that one, that's for sure. If the lighting looks a little different on the bench, I've got another light on the left side right now, so I've got two lights right on the bench. I found an old light fixture that I had years and years ago, and my daughter stole it, had it up in her room. Of course, she's been moved out for a while, so her room has just been kind of used for storage of stuff. And I just happened to find it there, and I grabbed it, brought it back down, and put an LED light in it. It had an old CFL that's still works from 2000 and before that, I'm going to say 97. An old Panasonic compact fluorescent light capsule, they called it, that I think I got them in 97. So 24 years old. It still works. This piece plugs into the top here. The board goes on like that. And then this other edge connector plugs into the top. So I'm going to plug this in first. This is the one that was severed. So say hopefully it's going to work. Don't know how long it'll run for. It's just all depends on how long that repair holds up. Okay, next is the camera board goes in next, like this, and it's got its connectors that plug in. There's 3 of them. First there's this one. Half the challenge when you take these things apart is remembering which connector goes where. Fortunately, most of them are keyed so that they only will fit in one place, or they're a specific length or a specific shape, so they'll only really fit where they're supposed to go. It's kind of hard to put them in the wrong place, as a rule. That one. And this one over here. Okay. Okay, that's got that in place. Next is the side cover. Front cover, the right side cover should say, is next. And it goes on like this. And there is a connector that has to go on first, so the connector is right here. Plugs into the side here. This is for the eject. Fits on just like that. There's 2 screws that hold it on. One is there, and the other one is on the other end of it down here. And now the right side cover goes on. So I didn't even have to unplug that to do it. Slides in place just like that. Put that screw back in, and then the battery cover back into place. Plug the battery holder back into place. And drop the cover back into the slot here. And we'll put a couple screws in, or at least one screw in, just to hold it in place while I put the rest of the camera back together. Can't test it at this point yet because the power switch is not connected. The power switch is on the front. It's actually on here. So until this is plugged in, the switches are actually the switch is on the main board. So I may be able to power it up now. Well, once I get this piece back on. Power switch, I think it's on this. Yeah, power switch is right here. So this is what controls the power. Camera mode off and VTR. So I have to connect the side panel up. But once I put this one on, I can then test it and see if it lights up. That way I'll at least know that something's improved. So we'll reconnect the viewfinder and the main connectors. Put that back in place. And same with this one. That back into place, and now I should be able to power this thing up and test it at this point. I'll just slide the chassis back together like that. Get that close enough together, and now we'll power it up and see if it does anything. Power cord's all tangled up. That's the way I got it. Alright. Do we see any light? We see light. Excellent. Can you guys see that? They're lighting up. Okay, so it's open now. Hopefully it didn't damage this thing. Let it open. Try and find a tape and see if it'll play. Alright, tape is threaded. Play button is right there. And will it play? and I have a picture here. So that means the camera is working. Let's just reconnect the front connector here. It's not plugged in yet. Where did I plug it in? Oh, you know what? It plugs into the side here. I gotta pull the side off to do it again. That's why I didn't fasten anything up. I got one connector to reconnect, and then I'll have video. Let's do that. The one I gotta plug back in, it's just this one cable that goes right here. This is for the output. I don't have to take anything apart. Let's plug this cable back in carefully. There we go. Now it's playing on the TV. I won't have sound yet because I don't have the front board hooked up, but it works. Let's try out all the other functions. Let's try fast forward. Fast forward works. Let's try reverse. Reverse works. Play. Stop. So they're all working now. Pause. Play. Stop. And turn on the camera. The zoom should also work on here. Why is zoom not working? Well, that one maybe, there may be another lead severed in there, but everything else appears to be working. So it's entirely possible that one of the other traces on here was also damaged, but basically it's functional now for playback, and it's something that it wasn't doing before, although again with the remote control it would have worked, but now it's working. So the top piece goes on here first, and where does this piece go on? This piece goes on this way. Except for me, I know where the remote is for my camera because I have a little digital 8 player that the buttons on the top, the GVD800, the buttons on the top are acting up on it. Some of them aren't working properly. Like what how the switches work is they put a resistor across one pair and measure the resistance, and some of the switches themselves are starting to go bad. So when I press certain things, like if I press rewind, it goes into play. If I press fast forward, it stops. You know, so when I use that machine for transferring digital 8 tapes, I use a remote control to control it. And the keypad was replaced on it once. Actually, the keypad was replaced on it twice. It was replaced on it when it was only a couple of years old. It started to act up, and it failed completely, and I replaced it. And then it was it got wet when I was doing renovations on my place, right when they had the roof apart and didn't have the roof finished. We had a downpour, and I had water. There was no gutters, so the water was running off the gutter and right into my window, and anyway, it flooded my office with or flooded my desk, I should say, and my Sony GVD800 got wet on top, and it ruined the buttons, and I replaced it a second time, and that was right when the buttons stopped becoming available. That would have been 2000 and that was 2003, 2002, and I ordered the part and got one, and they said that they were down to a very limited stock on them, so it was going to be a part that wasn't going to be available, like everything else, right? Everything's like that. Even when the units were still relatively current, parts were hard to get.
I've got a picture. I'm gonna go grab a remote control. Guess what? The remote doesn't work, so we got to take it apart again. So upon inspection, it looks like water may have entered this camera also at some point. If we look down the circuit board here, we'll see that there's evidence that there has been some water enter the cabinet at some point on the circuit board. You can see evidence that water's got in here. So I'll use some isopropyl to try and clean this up as best I can, and say hopefully it hasn't caused any permanent damage on the unit itself. We'll clean up that. You know, people would take the camera out and it would get a sprinkle of rain on it, and it would get down in between the seam and get onto the circuit board, and that was a major cause of failures of cameras for different things. So let's get this unit put back together, and we'll test it out. Okay, the camera's all back together. I found another problem with it. It was putting out a picture on the camera, but it's now not. It's looks to be. I remember I showed you some water damage on there. Well, one of the other ribbon cables looks like that one that goes to the CCD has also had some water on it, and it looks like it may have corroded it. Maybe just moving it, putting it back together, the connection went bad on it. But anyway, it wasn't zooming either. But as a playback machine, it seems to be working okay. I've got a remote control here, and I can control it with the remote control. That wasn't working either, but we fixed that up. Now the remote control is working. I can search forward, search backwards. Oh, that's reverse play. Play, search reverse. So I've got the remote control working on it now, slow motion. So I think that's about as good as I'm going to get this one working. I've got it working as a playback machine. It needs another ribbon cable. It needs the little ribbon cable that goes between the CCD and the main board. Right at the CCD end, it was all kind of corroded there because water had been dripped onto it. Can't do much about that. I don't know if we'd ever get apart. I thought I had one of these cameras. I had one very similar that would have had that cable in it. The one that I ripped the chassis out of to fix my DCR-TRV110. It would have had that same board. But I don't know what happened to the camera section, the board with the camera on it. I don't know what happened to that. I've got the other part of the chassis. I've got the viewfinder, like the flip-out screen and stuff. But I don't know what happened to that piece. It would be nice because I could have robbed the piece off of it. But it's working for now. The buttons on the machine itself are also functional. So I'm just using the buttons on the top now to control it. They're working. It's a playback machine. I'll probably be happy that it works as a player. The camera part, again, missing another little flex cable, and because of where it's all corroded at the end, it plugs into the camera. It's not really one that can be repaired, I don't think. No, there's not enough room on it to repair it. Anyway, this one's dragged on long enough. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.